Yosaif August was a law student preparing to become a civil rights lawyer. Yosaif was involved in community and campus-based civil rights activities in the North. He went to Hattiesburg, Mississippi in 1965 to coordinate legal activities in Forest County, sponsored by the Law Students Research Council. He later left law school to become a community advisor. Yosaif returned to Mississippi twice last year to participate in Freedom Summer 50th Anniversary Gathering. He's currently the principal of Yes to Life Coaching. It's a coaching group, and he's the author of the recently published Coaching for Caregivers, How to Reach Out Before You Burn Out.
So I gotta stand up. More than you guys. So thank you. And it's amazing to me in the.
Can you speak more loudly?
A little louder, you know. Just because the fans are.
Yeah, that it's amazing to me in terms of my journey as a person, and my journey as a man, and my journey as a Jew, to be here. And to be here as an organic part of this particular congregation, which combines so much of what I never even imagined there could be in a Jewish life. So what I would like to do is very briefly just talk a little bit about those questions here that get asked. But I want to share some experiences that just their images from my experience in the Civil Rights Movement. The only immediate things that I can say about relating to the book, about characters or what have you, is that I drove a powder blue Corvair. I can't imagine a parent giving a kid a Corvair as something that would ostensibly be safe, because it was notorious for being one of the. Now I think Ralph Nader.
Unsafe at any speed.
Yeah. So, and the other one is that I almost caused somebody to drown. So, thank God it didn't happen. So I went right to the story about how did I get involved in the Civil Rights Movement. Larry Bush and I were talking earlier this week. You said I wasn't a red diaper baby, and I didn't come from a whole progressive kind of tradition. Some kind of liberal, general Jewish background. I was a young Israeli kid. I was actually very involved in the synagogue, much more than my parents were. And one day I was on my way to a summer job, and another kid in the neighborhood said, "Hey, we're having a meeting tonight to integrate Harchester," which at that time was the largest housing project in the world. It was owned by Metropolitan Life Insurance. And he said, "You want to come?" And I said, and I remembered some bloody incident the Communist Party had been involved in a few years before that, connected to trying to bring in an African American into Harchester, and just the whole vibes of it didn't feel right to me. And then I got on the train, and on the way downtown, it hit me like, duh, you got to go to the meeting. Of course, we have to do something about this. And by that night, by the end of the meeting, I was co-chairing the group to integrate Harchester.
That's in the Bronx, right?
Huh?
Yes,
The Bronx.
In the Bronx, yeah.
And you live there, right?
Oh, and I lived there, right? Thank you, my beloved. I proudly came home to tell my parents that I am co-chair of this group, and was all ready to get the kudos and everything else. And the bleep hit the fan. I was so off. I hadn't read what was the family's values and stuff. I was threatening their security to have a decent home, the most decent place they had ever lived. It was so hard to have. And Metropolitan Life Insurance Company was this omnipotent company that could throw them out. And just like what you did to your father's security clearance, I was certainly easy. I could have done it to my parents' security. Anyway, I continued to do that work in terms of raising the issue that his time had not come. It did come later. Okay? But there were 12,000 apartments in Parkchester, and there was no African-American family there. It was really, but in the process of that, we went to my rabbi, and our strategy was, okay, let's go to the clergy, we get their help, and then we'll blah, 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 blah. To go to my rabbi, and it's very similar to my parents, except he didn't yell. But he did say, I don't want schwarzes here. I mean, there was no subtlety. All right? I didn't want them drinking wine and dropping bottles on the grass. You know? So I was shocked. I mean, on both of this, with my parents and with the rabbi, to say that my world, the kind of organizing principle of my world was shattered. My ability to make sense was really shattered. So that was kind of like, that was part of this process of why did I wind up in Mississippi. In the Bronx, I also was involved with CORE. We picketed the White Castle hamburger train. Why anybody would ever really want to do that. But we picketed. It was the most dangerous situation I was ever in my life, including Mississippi. The white community rioted. Police were on horseback. In this case, they actually were protecting us. And my experience of the movement and music, it was really scary. There were a lot of lights at night. I had never been on a picket line before. I stepped onto the picket line, and they're singing, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, walking up the freedom line." Well, I just got to say that at that moment I really felt invincible. I mean, it was something that in my life, there's few things I'm going to say about memory, but I remember that, and I remember what it felt like in my body. You know, the power of music. So, fast forward, I did some other things in the Bronx, and I did some things on the campus. We had the first protest rally when the children in Birmingham were killed in the church, and they'd never been at any kind of event like that at Hobart College before. They certainly were afterwards, but they weren't at that point. Okay, so in 63 or so, I went to the March on Washington, and you know, it's so sanitized the way it's handled in storytelling now. But oh yes, you know, I have a dream. But it was invented. It never happened anything of that kind of magnitude. And it was not a sure shot that it was going to be a safe place to be. You know, I think there may have been 1 million people there. It was a huge, huge gathering. And so I was there for that. 64, I was busy trying to stay out of the military. So I was going to, my deferment was canceled, and I had to get myself into law school very quickly. And I did want to be a civil rights lawyer ultimately, but I had some more movement things I wanted to do. And so I went to law school, and I was just itching to really be in the center of what was going on. And I got myself an internship in the Law Student Civil Rights Research Council to go to Mississippi. And I really didn't want to go to a border state. Somehow or other, I mean, I was partly dealing with my own demons about cowardice. I really felt that I didn't have courage, and one of the reasons for going to Mississippi was, I think, on that level, of wanting to step into that and face it. So I gathered with a couple of people around 14th Street in Manhattan in a terribly battered Beetle that had no paint left on it. And the first driver was somebody who had a serious illness. His body was totally bent, and he was the main driver. And I didn't know how to drive a stick. I caused the traffic jam in North Carolina on a clover leaf because I couldn't get it into first. I learned how to do that over time. So, okay, Mississippi. Okay, so now I'm going to actually. I have something I brought with me that from back in the time in Mississippi, from that summer. one night we felt we weren't doing anything, we weren't making any impact, and we were really very frustrated. And the tension was getting higher and higher, and in 100-degree weather, tension and stuff, can really be intense. So the Klan, one night, burned about 6 crosses around town. The next morning, I snuck up to a railroad track, and I got this, and I hid it out in the place that I was staying, and I took it back on the train from Mississippi, and I had somebody who was sitting next to me whose great-grandfather had been one of the founders of the Klan, and he didn't know who I was or what I was doing, and he was minding my cross. So this, to me, this has a symbolic value. I cannot imagine what this means to black people in terms of their experience in seeing this and what it meant. The intensity of the thousands of people whose lives were taken when these were burning. We're burning the candles for Hanukkah, and our light the flames have a certain meaning. So anyway, I dug down in our basement cellar thing on Friday. This is Sunday, and found it. So here it is, and anybody who wants to see it, a few things about Mississippi. Memory. Memory is a really strange thing. It isn't just like, you don't remember something. I don't remember faces and names. I have a little problem, as some of you know, with face blindness. But there's another kind of memory thing that you don't know something. How could this have really happened in this way? So one night I was at the home of one of the most incredible community organizers I ever met. He was my closest to Saul Alinsky in terms of what he did. A white minister from the Midwest moved to a white area of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, lived in that area while he did organizing in the black community. Pretty vulnerable place to be. One night I was in the bedroom of their house making a call to some people up north. And then I finished the call. We all left, the whole gang of us left. And my memory was that later that night, that same room was sprayed with shot. This is a family. There were 4 kids in that family. They all looked like the Norman Rockwell kids with red hair and freckles. That house was sprayed with shot. So a few years ago, I went to a memorial for Bob Beach, this minister, and I asked him, it was his memorial, so I asked his widow, did this really happen? Did this seemed like, and she said it did. I mean, and that I also didn't remember being freaked out about it. You know what I mean? I must have been. I mean, some traumatic things that happen. And by the way, one thing about traumatic and traumatic injury and other kinds of physical injuries is that I don't think it's really been dealt with in the movement about all the people who have been hurt in various ways, and particularly psychologically. It was raised at the reunions that I went to this year a little bit, but nobody seemed to be talking about it. There's a whole thing with veterans and traumatic stress, right? Well, a lot of us are veterans, but we're not considered veterans. And I'm just saying this. I feel very fortunate that I was able to not get hurt, and I got scared, but I didn't get hurt. But there are other things that happened. I don't remember how it came to pass. That I was in a courthouse getting the names of hundreds of people who were supposed to have been registered by a federal district court decision, and I typed them on the typewriter, and they thought I was from the Justice Department, so they let me use the typewriter, and I brought the list back to the black community. I have no idea how that ever happened. I don't know what it was about, but it was something that I wound up doing. Okay, this is a sweet one, and I also can't imagine how it happened. Jewish. I asked Bob Beach, does he know anybody in the Jewish community that I could visit and talk with? So he tells me the dry goods store, the name wasn't Cone, but it was the dry goods store in town. And I called him up and said that I was just driving through town and I wanted to have a meal with a Jewish family. I mean, I just feel I can't imagine having that kind of chutzpah to do that. And I got invited, and I went there, and I peeled Gulf shrimp with the daughter. And we sat down and we had a meal. There were 3 generations. The grandmother was there, 3 generations of the family. And we're talking and what have you. The meal is finished, and the shrimp were really good. Right? And the father goes to the cabinet and he takes out this little bottle of cherries. And he opens it up, and I get this whiff of it. And he offers me one. I said, after you. So he takes the first one. It's the old James Bond thing. You want to see this? So he takes one, I take one. He takes one, I take one. About 3 of them, I think we had. So each one was 180 proof.
Oh my gosh.
So after 3 of them, I was ready to tell them who I was. And we had the most heart conversation about our lives. How did they get there? And how come they weren't part of the movement? And it was very clear why they weren't part of the movement in terms of how vulnerable they were. But it was like such a special time of across such a divide. And then that night they drove me back to the black area, which was a pretty huge thing to be able to do. A few other things. It was amazing to me the SNP kids, these organizers, these young people, the wisdom that they brought at an age I didn't realize how young they were. Did you ever connect with Doug Smith, by the way?
We didn't know him.
No, but I'm saying you didn't know the 6 people there. Okay. Well, and you didn't, right?
No.
But I just followed him. I just watched him. Somebody was arrested, and I went with him into the jail to be able to speak to Mary Louise Crosby, the woman who had been arrested there, and try to integrate the courtroom. And I just watched the fine line between being aggressive, where you would really be beaten up, and being passive, where you'd also be beaten up. So that fine line of doing it, and it was really. So years later, I went to 3 reunions. One was about 15 years ago. I saw Doug Smith, and he used to be this little string bean of a guy, and he was huge, and not fat. He was just a huge guy, and I realized what a baby he had been. But he was still growing up, and he had this wisdom. He had this, and I asked him why he didn't let me take Mary Louise Crosby to the federal court in Jackson. I had set everything up to go, the affidavits and to get this into court, and he refused to let her go. And I ran, my nervous stomach at the time snapped. I checked out for a day. I went into a motel just to chill out. I was so upset that I had all this set. We were ready to move forward with an important action. And I asked him after all those years, Doug, why did you refuse? Was there a political thing? Was it turf? And he said, I didn't trust her. Mm-hmm. She was going to be a bad witness. Mm-hmm. She was a pretty wild lady, okay? And she was very courageous. But he was right. I mean, just think about the wisdom, about that. Okay, I got to share one other thing. My Uncle Barney, who was a real character, on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, he was partly responsible for the first public housing, some of the first public housing in Manhattan. But he was, later years, on the wrong side of every community issue. And he was with the local Chamber of Commerce. So I could just know my uncle was just, you want to have community controlled schools, he'll be against it. And all that kind of thing. So I go to Mississippi, and one day, there's a package that arrives, and my dear uncle, feisty guy, had sent a salami the boy in the army. That used to be the thing for the summer. From Katz's Deli. And my popularity in Hattiesburg soared. And I got only a little bit of stuff. One last thing about judgment. There was a prosecutor named Jimmy Dukes. Now you could imagine what that conjures up. Jimmy Dukes, like what kind of, right? He's not like an active listening person. Non-verbal communication, right? Jimmy Dukes. So I had the great joy of, I had to delay a court proceeding. There was a black guy who was arrested for exposing himself to about 6 white women who were right there ready to testify about it happening. And we checked out, he really wasn't somebody in the movement. They weren't trying to do this, but whatever it was, this guy was going to be hung up. I mean, he was going to be hung, not hung up, hung. I mean, so I had to disrupt it. So I was dealing with Jimmy Dukes to try to just delay it. And, okay. So ultimately, we got the lawyer. The lawyers came to town from 90 miles away in Jackson. That's how far the lawyers were, and they got us some kind of a deal and what have you. And and also I arranged to get. There was before the Panthers, there was the Deacons for Defense.
Deacons for Defense,
right? So I knew some people who were connected to that. So I arranged that he would get protection when he got out of jail, so he'd get out of town. So years later, I go to a reunion in Hattiesburg, and there's Jimmy Dukes. And it turned out this bad man, when Bernie Damer was killed, he was the head of the NAACP, he was killed right after I left Hattiesburg, that Jimmy Dukes had said, we don't do that here. And he spent years going after the killers and bringing them to trial. I'm not sure if ultimately, but anyway, so I just say for me to be able to see in terms of judgments about people that I was wrong, and it was a very good learning experience. The kids at the reunion. This is the shirt for the reunion last year. It's a very cool reunion. They had 1,000 kids at a Congress, and these kids were not into nostalgia. What did Sean say about not nostalgia, but memory, yes. But so this is about going forward. So these kids organized with the United Auto Workers a demonstration at the Nissan plant, which is right near where we were at Super College. And Nissan has a mile-long plant. A mile long, could you imagine? No union. And this is the only country where they don't have unions in Nissan. So they were doing the same old songs, except they had conga drums, so the rhythms were. So I guess that's, yeah, that's, I'm way over time, right?
Yeah.